I'd like to thank everyone for being here this evening. The summer's winding down, and I know there are fewer and fewer warm nights left, and this is a particularly beautiful one. So we really do appreciate your willingness to learn more about the very important topic of water conservation. My name is Carolyn Bain. I'm a member of the Darien Advisory Committee on Sustainability. And if this doesn't sound that familiar, that's because even though we've been around since the end of 2012, our committee has gone through some name changes depending on what we've been working on. We're appointed by and advise the Board of Selectmen. We were originally appointed in late 2012 as the Transfer Station Advisory Committee. At the time, our charge was to educate residents on single-stream recycling. But as we found more and more ways to increase recycling opportunities, we were renamed the Recycling Advisory Committee. A few years later, when the town of Darien signed on to a statewide initiative known as the Clean Energy Communities Program, energy was added to our charge, and we became the Energy and Recycling Advisory Committee. Finally, in late 2018, when the town registered with Sustainable CT, a statewide initiative to promote health and well-being of residents, the Board of Selectmen passed a resolution establishing us as the Advisory Committee on Sustainability. So as our responsibilities evolved, so too did our name. We are a committee of 7 members. Craig Flaherty is the chair, and over the years we've increased both the number and types of materials that Darien residents can recycle. We've added light bulbs, batteries, mattresses, paint, textiles, smoke detectors, and more recently, food scraps. We also applied for and were awarded a state grant to construct the new swap shop and arranged for the installation of solar photovoltaic systems on 3 additional municipal buildings at no cost to the town. For the past several months, we've been working to complete an application for certification from the Sustainable CT Foundation. Among other things, we must demonstrate the town's achievement in several categories, ranging from thriving local economies to vibrant arts and culture to well-stewarded land and natural resources, which is what brings us here tonight, as education on water conservation is critical to our goal of sustainability. And now I'd like to introduce our first selectman, Jaime Stevenson.
Thank you very much, Carolyn. You've now heard the life cycle of the Transfer Station Advisory Committee, which I just have to say that the incredible people that are so dedicated, Carolyn and others, have willingly accepted these added responsibilities as the town has evolved and desired to take on more and more programs and ideas around the issues of sustainability. And certainly starting with how we can be more efficient about our transfer station. You might remember we used to have a bulk pickup program where people would put their very usable goods out on the street. They would sit there for weeks. It would rain, it would snow, and those items became unusable. So we changed that, and we moved to the program of single stream recycling. So this amazingly dedicated group of people has been ready, willing, and able to keep pace with the desires of the town, and I really want to thank and applaud them. And in addition, Carolyn took on herself with a bunch of volunteers the food scrap recycling program, which has been a wild success, and hopefully many more people are participating and also looking to do composting in their own yards. But the reason why we're here tonight is to certainly celebrate the efforts of the Advisory Committee on Sustainability and their support for the town's desire to seek certification for bronze certification to be a sustainable community. And I really have to shout out to Kathy Finnegan, who's sitting right here. She's done an extraordinary job in such a short period of time. And the fact that we're about to submit an application is 100% due to Kathy and Craig and Carolyn and the committee members. So I'm very, very grateful for all of your very hard work. What I love about Sustainable CT, as you heard, there's 9 or 10 categories, and sustainability isn't just LED light bulbs and solar panels on the roof. It's really about the community itself being sustainable in all aspects: financial, human service, housing, a variety of different things, along with all of the wonderful things that we think of when we talk about sustainability. But it's really to help a community be a community and be very resilient. And I think that being part of this program, the Board of Selectmen believes that being part of this program will be an excellent way to showcase our town to people and businesses that might come looking and want to try and find a home for their families or for their new business. They're going to look and they're going to see our commitment to being a sustainable community, and that's going to set us apart. So I'm so grateful, and tonight we're here to talk about water conservation, certainly an issue that's been top of mind for me as your first selectman for a number of years. As we've worked through a series of droughts, I'm happy to say that I think we're out of the drought cycle, at least this year, but we have really been challenged over the last couple of years in the issue of what happens when our reservoirs are depleted, and looking at the issue of the extraordinary amount of consumable water that's taken up by home and business irrigation systems, and how can we change the mindset of the people in our community to understand that you can do without irrigating your yard for a couple of days, because if we're not mindful of conserving our water, we're going to find ourselves without water. And water, as you know, it sounds very cliche, but water is critical for life. So I've been working hand in hand with my colleagues across the state, with our friends from Aquarian Water Company, with all of our irrigation service providers, to change the policies around home and business irrigation. And now we have a new system of mandatory restrictions on irrigation, and I think it's working very, very well. And I won't steal the thunder of our friends from Aquarian, who I'm sure will talk about that tonight. I see Twig is here. But I want to thank you very much for taking an interest in this program tonight. Water conservation should be top of mind for all of us. There's small things that we can do, and there's very big things that we can do as a community. And if we partner together, we'll have a very successful outcome. So thank you very much, and thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you, Jamie. I'd like to let everyone know that our committee would not have been able to achieve what we have done without the support of Jamie and the Board of Selectmen, so thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Twig Holland, the program coordinator for Aquarian Water Company. Twig has been coordinating Aquarian's water conservation program since 2016. Through this program, excellent educational workshops are offered to students in grades 6 through 8. And if you have a student who just completed the 7th grade at Middlesex Middle School, you should be sure to quiz them when you get home, because they just participated in this program in May of this year, right? Twig also offers presentations to groups like this one, service organizations like the Rotary and Lions Clubs, and homeowner and neighborhood associations. Twig Holland, Aquarian Water.
Good evening. Thank you, Carolyn, for that great introduction. I am happy to be here and want you all to know that when we did have a water supply issue back in 2016, your first selectman was one of the first to support our efforts in water conservation. So thank you, Ms. Stevenson. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to talk about drought conditions. We'll spend some time, a little bit of time, talking about the current conditions, which are good. And we're going to spend most of our time talking about conservation measures and the number of things that you can do to conserve water in your home, and why Aquarian took some of the actions that we did. A bit of information first off about Aquarian. We are one of the largest independent investor-owned water companies in the country. We are the the largest investor-owned utility in New England. We've been in this business since about 1857, when P.T. Barnum and a bunch of his buddies got together and started a water company in Bridgeport. And the main reason for doing that was for fire protection. They were tired of their homes and businesses burning down. And the company has grown by leaps and bounds. We now serve 52 communities in Connecticut. There are sprinkling in New Hampshire and Massachusetts. Back in December of 2017, we were acquired by Eversource, and so we're now part of the Eversource portfolio. Here's where your water comes from. If you live in Darien, the city of Stamford is a large part of your supply, the 5 reservoirs that we have there. We also send a fair amount of water through the Southwest Regional Pipeline that brings water from the reservoir system in what we call our Bridgeport system, and that comes to Darien. That Bridgeport system is huge. It's much, much larger than the combined reservoirs in Greenwich, the combined reservoirs in Stamford. We've got one reservoir alone is 4 times the size of Stamford. So we have a lot more water capacity, storage capacity up in Bridgeport. When you think about it, the city of Bridgeport, when we were building that system, Bridgeport was a manufacturing powerhouse. And manufacturing requires people, and it usually requires water. And so the system was built with a lot of foresight, and the good news is when we ran into a water shortage in 2016, we were able to get more water from Bridgeport down here. This is what Laurel Reservoir in Stamford looked like, what it looks like before the drought starts. It's full, and Laurel is one of the reservoirs in Stamford that supplies Darien. 3 months later, it looked like this. Now, we're not supposed to have islands in our reservoirs. That's not necessarily a good thing. So you can see how in 3 months, the water shortage became fairly severe. Here's why. The graph I'm showing you shows precipitation from 1900 all the way up to the last year I have you on here is 2016. If it rained the same place, the same time, the same amount, day after day after day, our graph would look like this flat black line. Our part of Connecticut would get around 42.82 inches of rain precipitation per year. Now, we all know that that doesn't happen. Some years we get more precipitation than normal, some years we get less. But if you look at 2013, 14, 15, 16, they were really, really unusually dry years. 2017 is about there. 2018, we're closer to normal. So you can see that the drought has a cumulative effect, especially when it comes to groundwater, water that's underground. So this is a pretty severe picture. We found ourselves in one of the worst droughts in 116 years, and the worst drought in over 50 years. Since the mid-1960s. So it was a pretty severe situation. Let's look at how we use water. The graph I'm showing you shows you water consumption in the towns of Greenwich, Darien, New Canaan, and Stamford. We know that between December and May, most people aren't filling pools, they're not watering lawns, nobody's outside washing a dog on Valentine's Day. So we're pretty confident that for those 5 months, that's indoor water use. All the towns are pretty similar. We can set a benchmark there for indoor water use. Once we go outside, look at what happens. Water consumption goes up and it stays up. And the single biggest use of water during warm weather months is irrigation on our lawns, on our plants. So we know that when we need to save a lot of water quickly, we can save it through limiting the use of water outdoors. Here's where Darien stands when we look at all of our residential customers in single-family homes. This doesn't include offices, buildings, condominium associations. Easton is right in the sweet spot. The average American uses 88 gallons of water per person per day. So there you have Easton. When we look at some of our other towns, Darien comes in at about 184 gallons per person indoors and 156 gallons per person outdoors, for a combined total of, what is that, 130? Is that the math works out? So it's pretty high. So again, it supports what we know from our baseline, that if we need to save water quickly, the single biggest way to do it is to conserve water outdoors. We're not alone in the Northeast. In fact, we're not alone in America. The map I'm showing you here shows you irrigation in the 48 continental states. From Boston and Cape Cod through Connecticut, New York, Long Island, New Jersey, down through Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., this place looks like it's one big lawn. We put more water on our lawns, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, than we do on all the irrigated crops in America. In fact, lawns are considered the most irrigated crop in America. So again, if we need to save water quickly, the single best way to do it is through limiting use of water on our outdoors, and more specifically on our lawns. So here's what happened in 2016. Let me take a moment to explain this graph. What I'm showing you here is status of the Stamford Reservoir system. This green line is what we call a 20-year trend. This is how, from watching our water over the last 20 years, our reservoirs typically perform. They start filling in the early winter months in November and December. They continue to fill through January, February, March, April. We're all indoors. We're not using water outdoors. Anything that lands in our reservoir we can use. Snow, sleet, hail, freezing rain, we'll keep it. Then, when we go outdoors and we turn on the sprinklers and we start to fill the pools and we do all the things that we do outdoors, the reservoir levels naturally decline. They level off late summer, early autumn, and then they start to fill again. This is what's happened for the last 20 years. What happened in 2016, reservoirs started out low. There's 2015 in the dotted line. You can see that the reservoirs were low then. Remember the 100-year precipitation graph I showed you? 2015 was not a great year for precipitation. So the reservoir struggled in 2016, early in the year, but they started to fill. They got almost to where they should be, and then when we went outside, they're supposed to be here, they're down here. So what we did, we put out a call to residents in the towns that are using the most water outdoors: Darien, New Canaan, Greenwich, Stamford, asking all our customers for voluntary conservation. You know what? Ratchet back on the water, water your grass a little bit less. And consumption went down, and then it shot back up. Because what people don't do, it wasn't raining. And what people don't do when it doesn't rain, what do? We turn on the sprinklers. So now we get to August. And we're in even worse position. Supposed to be there, we're here. Reservoirs are around 60-some% full. We put out another call, and this time we were more specific. You know what? Let's water the lawn twice a week. Your lawn's going to be okay, but just water the lawn twice a week, people. We are going through water like crazy. And consumption went down a little bit, and then it went back up. And in September, mid-September, in working with the Department of Public Health, with the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, with the Department of Consumer Protection, who governs water utilities, and working with the CEOs of Darien, Greenwich, New Canaan, and Stamford. We implemented a mandatory ban on use of water outdoors. You couldn't wash a dog, you couldn't wash a car, you couldn't water your lawns, you couldn't fill a pool, you could not use water outdoors. As you can see from this graph, this is why we did it. These colored lines are drought triggers, and they're pretty serious triggers. The drought, actually, this is where we declared the ban on the use of water outdoors. The drought continued, and because it didn't rain, people had shut the sprinklers off, but we still continued to go through water like crazy. So we crossed the first drought trigger and we were headed to the second. We think if we hadn't banned the use of water outdoors, we would have been worse than what we were. Here's the real-time look at it. Back then, Stamford had 110 days of water storage remaining in their reservoir system. Darien was, Greenwich, was around 50. So it was a pretty serious situation. And then we started moving water around. So we had the ban on use of water outdoors, and now we built this temporary pipeline. You may have seen it going down the side of the Merritt Parkway. It went under driveways, over stone walls, through yards, and that brought 4 million gallons of water a day from our Bridgeport Reservoir system down to Stamford, and we pushed it out to the other communities from the Stamford system. So that really kept these 4 communities out of trouble. Following year, we didn't want to ever have to ban water a year. It has an impact. Look at what happens when you ban water. People that had contracted for plantings. Autumn is a great time to establish plantings. Nothing's getting planted because you can't water it. So nurseries had orders canceled. People that were going to put sod down, canceled. Homeowners, they're trying to get certificates of occupancy to move in. And you have to have a lawn, I believe, in most communities. You have to have something in your front yard. All that canceled. If you're a scout or a cheerleader and you have a car wash for a fundraiser, not that year. So it had an economic impact, and we didn't ever want to ban the use of water again. That's pretty draconian. So what we did was we said, you know what? We're going to let irrigation start again if you have an automatic sprinkler system twice a week. There's a system based on house numbers, odd, even. You can water 2 days a week. You know what your days are, and now your grass can stay healthy. And so we put out a full court press to make sure that folks knew about the limitations on irrigation, and that only applies to overhead sprinkler systems. If you have drip irrigation, use it whenever you want. If you want to stand there with a hose, we'll let you stand there all day and water. So it's only overhead because it's one of the least efficient ways of watering your lawn. We extended the 2-day-a-week irrigation policy to Westport and Newtown in 2018. Based on weather, this year we didn't have to extend it, but it's believed that at some point going forward, it's probably going to be in all communities that we serve. And here's where we are right now. It's pretty easy to follow the 2-day-a-week system because we've been blessed with rain this year. So our reservoirs are in pretty good shape. Again, there's our 20-year trend. Here was I think that's 2017, there's 18, there's where we are right now. So we're in decent shape. The reservoirs are behaving better than they usually do at this time of year. We're not letting up, though, on the irrigation restrictions, and here's why. We don't want to do on again, off again. Now you can water, now you can't. It's much easier to just say, you know what, we're going to irrigate 2 days a week. It's the responsible thing to do. The other thing is, we've seen this movie before. The map I'm showing you is the drought conditions in Connecticut. It happens to be on September 19th of 2017. Most of the state at that point was drought neutral. Just parts of New Haven and New London counties and Middlesex counties were in a very, very mild drought. 1 month later to the day, the whole state went 60 miles an hour backwards. Most of the state now is in a mild drought. The northeast corner of the state, Hartford, Tolland, and Putnam counties are in a more severe drought. That's just 1 month. If it doesn't rain for a month, this is kind of what happens. So we want people to continue conserving water, using it wisely, so that if we encounter something like this again, we don't have to do more draconian measures. We didn't want to have a policy and not support our customers, and so we worked with the University of Connecticut to come up with a 5-part pamphlet series that gives homeowners suggestions for things that you can do to have green grass, beautiful plantings that are all drought tolerant and drought resistant native species. So if you go to our website, you can download any of this information, print it out, do whatever, and it's wonderful materials that'll give you a lot of ideas on how to stay green and be green at the same time. Some smart things to do if you do have an irrigation system, just be smart with the way you use it. No one is allowed to irrigate between, I think it's 10 a.m. and 6 p.m., even on the 2-day-a-week system. A lot of times on the hot part of the day, anything that lands is going to evaporate before it hits the lawn and does any good. So we want people to be careful with when they irrigate. We love it when people use the smart systems that are moisture sensors rather than time-driven, because they're more accurate with the amount of water that you need. And then just set your system so that you're watering the lawn and not the driveway and not the sidewalk and not the right side of all the cars that drive past your house on any given day. And then again, go native. We really strongly advocate the use of natural native plants that are far more drought tolerant. We host a rain barrel program. Anybody that wants to go to our website, I believe the information is usually posted around March, April, and all we do is we connect the customer with the rain barrel company, and we provide a convenient pickup location. So everything is done between you and the manufacturer. The rain barrel themselves can hold potable water. They've repurposed, they come over here carrying olives and olive oil. So it's probably not water that you want to drink, but you certainly can collect it and use it to water a lawn or water flower beds and so forth. Conserving indoors, shut the water off when you brush your teeth. Things like use shower aerators, use the smart sensors for those. The laundry, if you don't have refrigerator on the door, keep a pitcher of water cold in the fridge. Another thing that you can do with water, if it's just light, not salted, you can drain it, capture it, and use vegetable water or pasta water for plants because it contains nutrients that plants just love. So those are all of the things that you can do to conserve in your homes. Again, the single biggest use outdoors is going to be irrigation. Going forward, we watch our reservoirs. If you go to our website, you can see the status of our reservoirs on any given week. We post that graph there for the reservoir systems in Greenwich, Stamford, Bridgeport, and I believe Mystic. So you can do that. We're also planning some long-term capital projects. Having to put in a temporary pipeline made it clear that we need to make some investments to long-term to get more water down here. And then our message is consistent. Use what you need, but use water wisely. Please don't waste it. I talked to, as Carolyn said, I talked to Kiwanis groups and Rotary clubs, and I think I've been in quite a few here in Darien. If you have a neighborhood association and you want me to come talk to you, I'll come and talk to you. I'd be happy to do that. And then we have a wonderful program for middle school students in grades 6, 7, and 8 that focuses on something different every year that's appropriate with their curriculum. So with that, thank you for everything you're doing to conserve water, for coming here to meet with us. And I don't know if we want to do questions now or after.
Does anyone have any questions for Twig?
All right. We're good. Thank you. Thanks very much.
So that's a great message, Twig. Use what you need, but use water wisely. And you saw all the ways that it's really easy to do that. And there are a ton of suggestions. I've been looking at Aquarion's website a lot recently. And actually, the series that you mentioned that was done by UConn, I printed a few of them out for myself. They're extremely informative, and it's really easy there are really little steps that you can take that can really have a profound effect. So you should take a look at their website too. Our next presenter is Nisha Nala-Wade. Nisha has lived in Darien for 9 years and is a rising senior at Darien High School. She's the founder and president of DHS's Health and Humanitarian Club, which is associated with the American Red Cross. She's also part of the school's student council and enjoys playing the piano and violin. Nisha is interested in the environment and sustainability and hopes to pursue environmental studies in college. Through a summer program at UConn, the Conservation Training Program, Nisha has been working with us this summer, specifically on water conservation. She's done a lot of research, created a water use survey that was widely circulated, and was instrumental in arranging this evening's program, including bringing Twig's expertise to us. So thank you for that. And now Nisha is going to talk about the water use survey that many of you may have taken and what was learned from it. Valuable information that can help us know where to focus our efforts going forward. Nisha?
Hi, so this survey was distributed over the course of 2 weeks, and 82.5% of people that took it were from Darien, so I think it's a good representation of our town. And it was distributed through websites like the Town of Darien website, Pollinator Pathway, the Darien Land Trust, Darien EPC, and also newsletters of the Darien Nature Center and Darien Men's Association. It was also an email list, such as that of the Garden Club and the Darien RTM, and in online and social media, such as the Darien Recycling Center, Facebook and Twitter, and also on the Darien Night and Darien Times. And hard copies were also at Mather Center, the Senior Center. And I analyzed a total of 197 responses, and I asked questions about how people in Darien use water, and hopefully they learn something from this educational survey on some tips on how to conserve water. So one aspect of water usage is in the bathroom, and I asked a question about how much time do you spend in the shower, and a majority of people answered 5 to 10 minutes. So some recommendations if you want to improve on this would be to consider low-flow shower heads, or find a way of timing yourself using a clock or even maybe a song you could time yourself to. Also, a majority of people said they didn't take baths, so that was good because taking a bath wastes more water than showering. And also, a majority of people run their bathroom faucets from 0 to 10 minutes a day. And most people also said they didn't have low flow faucets, or they only had some low flow faucets. I think it's really important to consider low flow faucets because it can half your water usage. So if you want to get an idea of what that's like, if you use your faucets 10 minutes a day, then you can half your usage from 30 gallons a day to 15. And also, low-flow shower heads are shower heads that use 2.5 gallons of water or less per minute. So that's saving a lot of water from 3.8 gallons of water per minute. There's also water usage in the kitchen, and I asked people questions about how long they run kitchen faucets a day. 52% of people said 0 to 15 minutes, and 40% of people said 15 to 30 minutes. Also, I asked questions about how they wash dishes, and most people said they use energy efficient or water efficient dishwashers. Some recommendations maybe to improve on this would be to drink water from the refrigerator instead of waiting for the tap to cool down, and then maybe washing produce in a bowl instead of using the faucet, and thawing frozen foods in the refrigerator instead of using water, and also scraping instead of rinsing dishes before you put them in the dishwasher, and also using the dishwasher with a full load only. I also asked questions about outdoor water usage. Most people water their lawn from 0 to 2 times a week, and some recommendations maybe to improve on this, on wasting water outside, would be to simply check for leaks in your irrigation system. It's really something simple but also really helpful. It's also important to, as Twig said, water your lawns during cooler times of the day, so like morning and evening, and also not on windy days, so you can reduce water loss due to evaporation. Also, native plants are really important. You can minimize the area of your lawn that gets watered. And also, you might want to check your soil for nutrient content, because better quality soil absorbs and retains water well. A rain barrel is also really useful because you can collect rainwater and then use that to garden your plants. Also, I asked some questions about recycling, and 90% of people recycle paper, 70% of people avoid or reuse single-use plastic, and 94% of people recycle bottles and cans. So these are all really good statistics. If there's any room for improvement, you could maybe find ways to recycle cardboard boxes. Perhaps some businesses will accept used cardboard boxes from online deliveries or mail deliveries. Also, maybe avoiding paper coffee cups at stores and bringing in a mug maybe instead, because often the paper cups in coffee stores are lined with plastic, so they're not recyclable. You can also use less paper by subscribing to digital versions of newsletters and also paperless billing. Also, just a fun fact, or not so fun fact, more water is used in producing a plastic water bottle than the amount of water it contains, so it's really important to try to avoid using plastic and recycling. Another aspect that a lot of people don't really think about is virtual water use, so things you do in your everyday life that in effect use a lot of water. So I asked people a question about how many miles per week they drive, and it's important to think about reducing how much gas you use, because 3/4 of a gallon of water is used to make and transport enough gas to drive 1 mile. So it's important to maintain your car so it runs efficiently, and also maybe you can carpool or use public transportation more often. Also, I asked a question about how much of energy that powers your house is from renewable resources, and most people said 0 to 10%. So some recommendations might be to consider solar energy, and if you don't want to power your whole house that way, you could maybe just try a solar oven or solar hot water heaters, or solar air conditioning. And also LED energy efficient lights are really helpful too. I also asked some questions about shopping and shopping for groceries because a lot of water is used in effect to produce the consumer goods we buy. And it was very varied about how often people shop, and just some recommendations would be to reuse as much as you can, donate as much as you can, and buy reusable materials. I also asked a question about what your diet is like, and 69% of people said they eat meat a few times a week, and 18% of people said they eat meat once a day, with a few people eating more or less meat. And the reason I bring this up is because it takes about 2,000 gallons of water to produce a pound of beef, 519 gallons of water to produce a pound of chicken, and only 39 gallons of water to produce a pound of vegetables. So it's really important to think about how much water is going into producing what we eat. And even if you go vegetarian just one day in the week, you can save 25,000 gallons of water over the course of a year. So it's really important to think about. Just some last recommendations and tips. Shared solar in CT is something that allows any electricity customer to get a portion of the power produced by a large solar array, with the benefits automatically credited to their bill without having to install solar panels. This is a pilot program, so hopefully it'll come to Connecticut soon. You can also buy rain barrels at a lower price with Aquarion's annual promotion, so maybe the town could remind residents about this. And also, just finally, one last tip is to help spread awareness about water conservation and some tips on how to conserve water, and maybe the town could put some information on this on their website for residents to see. Any questions? Yes?
I didn't understand the solar example next to the how that was saved.
Sorry?
I didn't understand what you said, what you would do to save
With solar?
the solar.
A lot of water is used in producing the electricity to power our houses, and if you get it from renewable resources, you're saving more water. Any more questions? Okay.
Thank you, Nisha. That was very well done. As you can see, she really put a lot of work into this, so thank you. Our next speakers need little introduction, as they've been speaking with various communities in and around Darien for the past year. Juliet Kane and Deepa Saxena are co-chairs of the Darien Pollinator Pathway. The Pollinator Pathway is a multi-town effort promoting a pesticide-free corridor of properties, public and private, that provide native plant habitat and nutrition for pollinators. Darien joined the effort in September of 2018. Deepika is an accredited organic land care professional certified by the North American Organic Farmers Association. She's a board member of the Darien Nature Center and an environmentalist with a special interest in organic gardening and farming. She practices near zero garbage and is actively involved in efforts to reduce the use of disposable single-use items. Juliet is a retired lawyer who has always been an avid gardener and conservationist. She's the chair of the Conservation Committee of the Garden Club of Darien, co-chair of BYO Darien, the group which proposed and oversaw passage of an ordinance to eliminate plastic bags in Darien, and co-chair of the Darien Green Team, an umbrella organization for all environmental and conservation groups in Darien. Juliet and Deepika will talk about the benefits of native plant gardens to water conservation efforts.
Thank you, Carolyn. I think we have a few technical issues, but my IT person here will resolve those while I speak.
Gary.
I thought that you would all be very confused as to why the pollinator pathway was here tonight on an evening when we're discussing water conservation, but I think it's been made clear now because Twig's mentioned, Carolyn's mentioned, and Nisha had mentioned the idea of going native. And we will talk about that because not only does the idea of going native, which means incorporating native plants in your landscaping, and we have a few over there, not only does that conserve water, but it also ends up improving water quality. So we will explain the connection. But first I want to give you some background. What I say may not match the slides.
Okay.
All right. So I just want to explain what a pollinator pathway is. And the idea came from a regional conservation organization called H2H, which stands for Hudson to Housatonic. And that is an organization which Aquarian is actually a partner organization. And they were mapping areas of the highest conservation value between the two rivers, the Hudson and the Housatonic. And what you see on the slide are the large green circles are the areas of the highest conservation value. So these would be land trust properties, arboretum, that sort of thing. And then as they mapped those areas, they saw that in between were vast spaces of developed land, urban, suburban type areas that were not hospitable to pollinators, because that's our primary focus. And so the thought was, well, how could we connect more easily these nice green, hospitable areas? And the thought was, well, maybe we can encourage municipalities, homeowners, businesses to start to make these areas greener, more hospitable through native plantings, maybe not using pesticides. And so this is what we end up doing. We end up by having various towns with pollinator pathways, and these pathways ultimately form a longer contiguous corridor of healthy habitat for pollinators. So our pathway, the Darien pollinator pathway, our primary goal is to restore habitat for pollinators, and we do this by asking residents in town to give up pesticides and to plant native plants. And we do this, our way of doing this is an educational approach. We're not asking for a law change yet. We're just simply educating people, and they can make their choice of whether they adopt this approach or not. And one of the things that we emphasize when we're educating is the beauty that you can bring to your backyards.
And we all do want to bring beauty to our backyards with beautiful plants and beautiful birds, butterflies, and other creatures. So how do you actually go about doing that? And so that's something that we've thought about, and we thought we would pass on to you. What do pollinators and other creatures that are so beautiful in the lawns, in our gardens, not lawns, in our gardens, what do they need to thrive? So basically, they need food, and habitat, a place that they can raise their young. Food actually, a lot of the pollinators depend on insects. So for instance, birds, they need insects, and insects need plants. So there's a cycle. There's a cycle of dependency, a codependency. And so basically, we need that. And what's happening now is, did you want to talk about that?
Sure. There are various threats to our pollinator populations. You're looking at a picture of one of the largest ones. But in addition, there is the issue of pesticides. We'll come back to that in a moment. There's urban development that we spoke about just now, which is what is fragmenting the ability for pollinators to migrate and to thrive. There is climate change, severe weather patterns. A lot of very high temperature will affect bees when there is a lack of synchronicity between feeding times for these pollinators and when the plants are growing. For example, if the growing season comes too early. It's too early for some of these pollinators to feed, so that they are out of sync with the seasons. But the one we want to focus on right now is the slide that we are calling the dead zone, which is the lawn. So we're finally coming back to what Trig has been talking about, and Nisha too. This is an area, and we call it dead because it is not hospitable to pollinators. There's not a single host plant there. There's nothing there that any bird or butterfly would find remotely interesting. Maybe the tree the bird could nest in, but other than that. And beyond that, as you've also heard, the lawn is an egregious consumer of water and an egregious consumer of chemicals, synthetic chemicals. So what's happening there then is that we're not only the pesticides that we're using, the chemicals that we're using, is destroying the native plant habitat anyway. And this is actually the same slide that Twig used, and you can see what she's already pointed out to you, that how vast the area of is that's covered by lawn. 40 million acres of land are now covered by lawn. So that actually makes lawn the largest irrigated crop that we can't eat. Now, having said that, I started to throw arugula seeds on my lawn because they're really deep green, and so this time next year I might be able to eat my own lawn. But that's not really normal. And we are obviously very concerned as the pollinator pathway about the use of chemicals on these lawns as well, because they are affecting the pollinators too. They're destroying the central nervous system of the pollinators. It's making them weaker. They're unable to fight disease. And the other thing with pesticides is that as we're spraying them on our lawns, they're leaching into the groundwater. So that's an issue for our water quality.
And so while we talk about, water and conserving water, we are talking about the quantity of water. And we don't really focus on the quality of the water. And how do you protect the quality of the water? And that's what we are trying to refer to here.
So this is the a slide on the environmental impact of lawn maintenance. And you can see, Twig's already given us these statistics on the amount of water that's used in irrigating our lawns. And as she mentioned, a lot of that, depending on when you water, is lost to evaporation and to runoff. And this slide also tells you 60 million pounds of pesticides are used on lawns each year. And by pesticides, we just mean any kind of chemical, whether it's a herbicide, rodenticide, fungicide, all of those. We just put them under the same umbrella of pesticides. So what is our solution?
Yeah, so our solution is that we should put in more native plants. One, they help with insects and the pollinator decline. We are all hearing in the news that pollinators are declining, insects are declining in this world. It's been in the news for the last 2 years. And so how do we go about addressing that problem? And the only way really to do that is to be proactively putting in more native plants in our areas. Most plant-eating insects, like butterflies and caterpillars, only feed on native plants. And the reason for that is that over the years, they've evolved together. So native plants and the butterflies and other insects have all evolved together. And they are dependent on each other, and they only feed on each other, or they only feed on the native plants. And what they found this has been happening all over the world. And in Amsterdam, there was an article about it, that's why we put it here. They had a similar issue where there was a decline in pollinators. So they went about it very proactively, planting native plants all over town, and they actually found a big difference. They kept, a census of all these insects, and before and after, and they found there was a huge, big difference. And so that's why we've been so involved in the pollinator pathway, because it's a similar concept. And what do we mean by native? A native plant is something that was here before the European settlers, because since then we've been bringing all these plants from other parts of the world. Before that, it was just whatever was in this area.
So the reason why native plants are relevant to the discussion tonight is because they really, really don't need the amount of watering that a lawn needs. So if you can replace, well, ideally all of your lawn, but even part of your lawn with native plants, you will find you use less water. They need a little bit of water to get them settled, get themselves settled, but once they're in the ground, they're really sort of self-sufficient. And the other nice thing about them is because they're adapted to the soil conditions, to the climate, they're really self-sustaining. They require very little maintenance. They're just not needy, and they don't need chemicals. They just accept where they're put, more or less. I mean, some like acidic soil, some like shady, some like sun. But you really don't need to have anything unnatural to get them to thrive.
If they're in the right place, if something that needs shade is in a shady space and if something needs sun is in a sunny space, they really don't need anything. They'll survive a drought if there's a drought. I mean, I bought from Aquarian some rain barrels. So when I plant native plants, I use the rain barrel to water it in the first year. And then subsequently, after maybe even the second year, but by the third year, they really don't need watering. And they pretty much grow on their own then. And it's because of these deep roots and being adapted to the area.
Yeah, so this slide is I think, really interesting, because if you look on the left-hand side, the non-natives...
Not very visible.
It's not very visible. You can read non-natives, but the little, that tiny piece that doesn't have any roots whatsoever, that is your lawn. So that is what I call the shallow-rooted water junkie. You have to keep feeding it. Feed me, water. And it's a lazy thing, because once you've watered it, there's no roots to dig down deep. It's just there wanting more and more water, more and more water. You compare that to the plants on the right-hand side. These are the self-starters. These are the entrepreneurs of the plant world. Look how far they've gone. Their roots are really, really deep. They can find water at depths that the non-natives can't find, and this is why they're self-sufficient. They find their own water, basically. And the one on the far right is nine bark. The one next to it is, I can barely read this actually, but black-eyed Susan. And then there's a drop seed, I think it's that drop seed.
Yeah, drop seed.
Next to that. So these are all native plants, and you can see not only are they finding water, so you don't need to give them water, that root system acts as a sort of filter for the water too. So this is just like the plants that filter water up in the mountains. What it's doing here is filtering out the any chemicals, contaminants, and impurities in the water. So this is where you start to see the water quality improving. Once you have these native plants too, in addition, as Deepika was saying, you're encouraging the insects that thrive on these. You're not using chemicals, so you're restoring the bacteria and the fungi, all the good stuff in the soil. You are improving your soil quality. And as a result of that and these roots, you have soil that is not compacted. It's very aerated, it's very healthy. That absorbs water better as well. So you are actually addressing other environmental challenges like flooding, erosion, and runoff, because your plants are basically holding that water in place, and the ground is better able to retain that water.
And that's why we feel that this pollinator pathway project is so closely tied to water conservation, because it not only helps conserve water, it also keeps it a little cleaner.
And actually, I think it was this morning or yesterday, I was watching a YouTube video where, I think it was in LA, the city was actually paying people per square foot of lawn to give up their lawn and plant native plants. And I guess the money was good, because there were a lot of people out there digging up their lawn and ready to plant native plants. So So
already talked about
yes,
that.
we've talked about most of these. You're minimising water usage. The one thing we talked about improving soil quality. That does go to the issue of improving nutrition too. I realise that's not completely on point tonight, but the better your soil, the better your food, obviously. So the bigger we can make this initiative, the more improvement we'll see overall. And this is a slide that Doug Tallamy used when he came to speak to us in the library in March. And it shows you, if you can read it, the sort of criteria that we traditionally had for planting, like does it look nice, will it screen my air conditioning unit, I want to be able to look at this when I get out of the car. And then you look on the right-hand side, and actually the seesaw should be tilted, shouldn't it, because there's many more on the other side. But one of those things is protecting watersheds, exactly what I'm saying. With those deep roots, we're preventing erosion, we're cleaning the water, we're conserving water. And then we have the other issues that we care about too, the wildlife appreciation, the restoration of the soil, and nutrition, human health, all of these things. And I think in the future, those will be the criteria for a really sustainable landscaping that we'll want to take into account, and not just does it look pretty. I think these look quite pretty, and these are all native plants.
So during this whole process, when we started on this path of putting Darien on the pollinator pathway, there were about 3 towns. There was Ridgefield, Norwalk, Wilton. And then since then, there are 30 towns now in Fairfield as well as in Putnam and Westchester counties. So it's really growing. The movement's growing. And actually it's happening in other parts of the country too, because people are becoming very aware of what's happening. And so they're taking steps to change that. And so just to give you a little background, I won't spend too much time. The Darien Pollinator Pathway, we started it as a collaboration of the Nature Center, the Garden Club of Darien, the Darien Library, and the Gardeners Center and Florist, which is the business on the post road. Our steering committee has members from the various green organizations in town, and the entire town of Darien is potentially on the pathway, because we find that being a small town and all these other towns around us are on the pathway, so it made sense to put all of Darien on the pathway. Now, not everybody is doing what they need to do, but we think over time we will convert people. That map there shows, all the green spots there are the spots that don't use pesticides and have 1 or 2 native plants, and oak tree counts as a native plant. So the main criteria is to not use pesticides. So as people, homeowners, businesses, they sign our pledge, and we have a pledge lying here somewhere. They'll have to look us in the eye and say we don't use pesticides. And then we color their property in green. And we're hoping that over time people will understand why it's needed and will go for it. We'll understand that it's not important to get rid of that last weed, but it's more important to keep the groundwater clean and not pump pesticides into it. So that's our hope, that people will take that, will understand that. And I think it's a matter of time. Everybody has that aha moment when we realize what we're doing to this world and we make our change. But it'll happen to everybody, it's just a matter of time. And so we hope that'll happen sooner rather than later. Our message is very simple. Rethink your lawn, reduce the size of your lawn if you can, plant native plants, and definitely don't use pesticides or other chemicals. And here are some examples. This homeowner had a very shady spot on his lawn, and so he converted it to a little garden with native plants, and it looks very pretty. This homeowner reduced the size of his lawn by planting a fairly large border around it so that the lawn part is less.
But doesn't use chemicals, and the lawn still looks pretty good.
Yeah. This homeowner got rid of his lawn completely and also solved some other problems. They had some like water collecting, rainwater, and also they planted these plants that actually absorb all this water and also make this whole area look so pretty, and there's no lawn. I think that looks really pretty. This one is somebody that planted a meadow in their backyard, which looks nice. And here's a lawn that's mostly clover, and the dog is really happy because there's no chemicals on this lawn. So that's it.
And the clover is actually a really good natural source of nitrogen for your soil. So the synthetic fertilizers that you buy are loaded with nitrogen. This is, just a very natural source that releases slowly and makes the birds happy.
That's all, folks.
Does anyone have any questions for Juliet or Deepika about the pollinator pathway or native plants?
We have a few plants here, and whoever came first can take one. There's some milkweed, they're from our garden. We dug them out and brought, we potted them. So they have no chemicals in them. There's milkweed, there's Joe Pye weed, there's
Agastache. And pink cone flower.
So
thank you. That was really So in a state like Connecticut, where water seems plentiful, it's easy to take it for granted. Thank you. But even especially since there have been above normal amounts of rain this spring. But while supply seems abundant, water is not a limitless resource, particularly the fresh potable water that's necessary for human survival. So Twig kind of gave us some background on the factors that led to the severe drought conditions that we suffered in 2016 and offered suggestions for preserving the water supply moving forward. And discussed how conservation needs to become part of our vocabulary to ensure that everyone uses water wisely all the time and not just when we're suffering from a drought. Nisha, through the analysis of her survey, showed that the people who responded to the water use survey overall seem to be doing a pretty good job of using water wisely. There are a few areas where, as a town, we might help to encourage residents, possibly by putting water conservation tips on the town website, encouraging residents to use rain barrels, and advertising when Aquarian runs their annual program where it's a reduced rate for the rain barrels, but you have to order it in, I think, February, March, or April. That's an annual thing. And she also, Nisha also discussed both indoors and outdoors, some of the small steps that people can take to save water. There's also a lot of interesting things on a lot of these websites. Like I mentioned Aquarion earlier and how there really is a wealth of information. There's something that is really kind of fun called a water calculator. It's a tool that lets you see how much water you and your family are using in different parts of your house. So if you go on their website, you can see that. You can put in the information for your family, and it kind of gives you an idea of how your water's being used. Nisha also introduced the idea of virtual water use, which is something that many people may not think about, but which also has a big impact on the water supply. So as you're driving and shopping and even eating, virtual water use is something to consider. Deepika and Juliet mentioned that, as it turns out, what's good for the pollinators is also good for us. They focused on native plantings and how, because they've adapted to local environmental conditions of both soils and climate conditions, they require less water. Also, maintaining the condition of your soil requires the use of less water because healthy soils absorb and retain water better, so you don't have to water them as much. Timing of planting is also an important thing. If you install plantings in the middle of the summer when it's really hot, it takes a lot of water for them to get established, but if you wait until, I think like October, I was told, was like one of the best months to install new plantings. It takes a lot less water to get them established. I just wanted to mention a couple other things. There are some postcards on the shelf when you first walked in, if you want to take one. It just has on the back of it some of the websites that we were talking about. Feel free to take one of those when you pick up your plant. And Also, if people who are interested, we have the food scrap recycling program at our recycling center, but a lot of people are interested in composting in their backyards because then you have the compost that you can use around your yard, and that's really great. You can't compost quite the same spectrum of materials that you can bring to our drop-off, but you can still put all your fruit and vegetable matter, coffee grounds, tea bags in there, and you'll have that compost to use around your yard, and that helps enrich the soil. If you're interested in learning how to do that, there are a lot of websites that we can share with you, but there's also actually going to be it's called Compostology, the Science and Simplicity of Home Composting. It's a workshop that's being taught by a master composter, Kathy Smith. It's Saturday, August 24th from 1 to 2:30 at the Norwalk Library. You do have to register for the program, and I can put the information to do so I can put it on our social media so that you can do that if you're interested. So again, thank you very much for spending your evening with us. We hope that you found this program informative and useful, and we hope that we've inspired you to try and use water even more wisely than you might be doing now. So thank you very much, and thank you to all of our participants.
Karen, thank you so much for hosting this evening. You were an amazing moderator and you know everything already. So I just thought that I would pick these in my garden today to show people that you can have native plants that look just as beautiful as our ornamentals. And this butterfly, just so people know, is not dead. It is not real. It's just a pretend monarch butterfly. And we have Joe Pye weed here. We have milkweed here, pink coneflower, nodding onion, agastache.
I love that.
Yes, this smells of it. It's anise hyssop, so you can smell it. It's beautiful. And this is clematis, virgin bower, and I think that's blue lobelia. So all of those are natives. They are wonderful because they don't need much watering. They certainly don't need chemicals or pesticides. And they are wonderful for our pollinators.
Well, thank you so much. I will put these in a spot where I look at them every day, and I thank you so much. It was a pleasure working with you.
Thank you.
Thunderous applause.